You have now entered a podcast show. A podcast show that you can listen to. A podcast show that talks about movies that you've either enjoyed, disliked, or a bit of both. This month, a podcast show that has entered a month full of surprises, dark moments, and the scariest of bunch to come in the month of October. You've just entered Codo Cinema Horror Month.
Good afternoon, and welcome to another episode of Codo Cinema, the podcast show where I talk about movies. I bid you welcome as your host, the man, the myth, the legend, Mark Codo, aka Codoman. Well, we have made it to the month of October, and you probably know what that means, right? Well, this is Codo Cinema Horror Month, and right now, I'm speaking in a sinister way possible to kickstart this this month for October in Codo Cinema.
Spooky.
Oh, you're joining in on the action, huh, John?
Yeah, it's Jonathan Fong.
Yep.
Back again.
Yep, Jonathan Fong is back on the podcast show for this week. So, John, welcome back.
It's good to be back.
Yep, feels good to be back on the Codo Cinema podcast show. And hey, it's October.
Yes, it is. Very spooky.
Well, since it is October, might as well talk about either some horror films or basically films of different genres that have scary elements. So you're probably wondering what film that John and I are going to talk about today.
I'm wondering too.
Yeah.
I don't know what film we're talking about. I'm just kidding.
Well, we're going to talk about the Venom sequel, Venom, Let There Be Carnage. So Venom, Let There Be Carnage is the sequel to 2018's Venom, set in Sony's own universe, Sony's Spider-Man universe. That is a new superhero universe for Sony. Did you hear about that too, John?
Yeah.
The sequel sees Eddie Brock, otherwise known as Venom, who's trying to revive his career in journalism by interviewing serial killer Cletus Cassidy, who would become the host of a new symbiote threat known as Carnage. Directed by Andy Serkis, who is very well known for his motion capture performances, such as Gollum in The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, King Kong, Supreme Leader Snook in the Star Wars sequel trilogy, Captain Haddock in the motion capture film The Adventures of Tintin, which was produced by Peter Jackson with Steven Spielberg directing. Plus, he also played Caesar in the reboot of The Planet of the Apes. And basically, Andy Serkis was very well known for motion capture performances, including CGI. So I'm pretty sure that was one of the reasons why Sony hired him to direct the Venom sequel. Plus, he served as a replacement director for original Venom director Ruben Fleischer, who directed the 2018 Venom film, but Ruben Fleischer was very well known for directing Zombieland. And Ruben was unable to direct the sequel. Instead, Ruben, along with Woody Harrelson, they were both doing Zombieland Double Tap, which is the sequel to the 2009 film Zombieland. Plus, Zombieland Double Tap came out in 2019. However, Ruben Fleischer would later serve as executive producer. Plus, other directors were also in line to direct the sequel, including Rupert Sanders, Rupert Wyatt, and Travis Knight. And in fact, Serkis was excited to adapt the comic book version of Carnage for the screen and explained that the symbiotes were designed to reflect their hosts through their designs, abilities, and movements. I feel like that's actually a pretty good point. I mean, don't you think the symbiotes reflect their hosts, particularly Eddie Brock and Cletus Cassidy?
Yeah, I do think to some extent that we're able to capture that quite well in both the animation and both the way that the character, like the model design of both of them.
Mm-hmm.
I would have loved to see more dramatic use of that, but I'll have more on that in a moment.
Yeah, I have some thoughts about that too. But anyway, going back to Andy Serkis, he even worked with dancers and actors on a motion capture stage to help define the movements of the two characters, and compared Venom to a quarterback who used brute force, while Carnage, Cassidy's psychotic personality, is shown through the and off killer movements, as well as being able to turn into mist and create all manner of tendrils. And Serkis compared fighting Carnage to fighting with an octopus, because Carnage in the film, he had a lot of arms, kind of like Doc Ock from Spider-Man, don't you think?
Yeah. There's a similar kind of multi-appendage kind of thing
Mm-hmm.
going on there. And they did use that well to a certain extent in some of the fight scenes, but again, I would have loved to see more creative use of
Yeah,
some of that.
I would have loved that. I would have loved to see more of that as well. So anyway, just to give you a brief description of who Venom is, John, you haven't seen the first film, have you?
No, I had not seen the first film. We also both don't have a whole lot of knowledge about the comic books, so we can't really attest to the accuracy in terms of the adaptation or whether or not the characters reflect the accuracy, but that's still not going to stop us from judging it, just from a movie standpoint.
Right. But I thought I'd bring up who Venom is. I mean, Venom is a sentient alien symbiote with an amorphous, if I'm saying it correctly. Amorphous. And it's basically a liquid-like form, basically pretty much from what we saw in the film. Basically, and the symbiote is survived by bonding with a host, usually a human host. And this dual life form receives enhanced powers and usually refers to itself as Venom. This is going to Venom, the character of Venom. Plus, Venom is known to be one of Spider-Man's greatest villains, while Venom, the symbiote, was the first host to Spider-Man, to which explains why Spider-Man got the black suit Spider-Man suit. And then the symbiote will later bond with Eddie Brock, to which Eddie Brock is probably, or should I say, easily one of the most well-known hosts for Venom. Plus, in later stories, Venom will later appear as more of an anti-hero doing good and putting aside his differences with Spider-Man, to which explains why in both films for Venom, it explains why we see him more as an anti-hero rather than a villain, because in Spider-Man 3, Venom was more of a villain. I mean,
that would be so cool, though, if we had a movie that really took the perspective of the villain character, and we got to see it from a villain perspective against a very traditional protagonist hero character. Wouldn't that be really cool? But
I mean, because the first film, it barely had any connections with Spider-Man, even though it was more on his own story. While the sequel, it actually put in a lot more for the sequel. But I think that will probably be something to bring up at the end. Since I mentioned Spider-Man. So, Carnage is basically Carnage is also an adversary of Spider-Man as well, and the arch enemy of Venom, as well as being an offspring to Venom as well, but much more powerful than the parent symbiote because of the symbiote's biology, and in many ways a much, much darker version of Venom. And this is referring to Carnage. Much like Venom, Carnage has had multiple hosts over the years in different variations of the character, particularly in comic books and other forms of media. But the most infamous one remains the character, their first character, which is Cletus Cassidy, the serial killer whose sadistic personality perfectly matches that of the symbiote. To which this is basically the sequel to Venom. Venom, Let There Be Carnage, has Cletus Cassidy as Carnage. And basically, that's basically what I got to describe Venom and Carnage. Basically, that's basically who they are in terms of who they are in terms of their characters. But John, you want to add anything onto it?
Yeah, I think so. It's interesting that you bring up these elements of how these characters have developed in the comic books, because it does contextualize quite a bit of how they're approaching these newer movies.
Right.
From what I understand with these two Venom movies, they haven't really shown Venom as the antagonist at all, right? Like he's been depicted as an anti-hero from the start.
Right, he's basically an anti-hero from the start, much like Deadpool, because Deadpool is also an anti-hero, but that's a different universe.
Yeah.
So, anyway, jumping into the film, we both actually saw this film in theaters, so
yeah,
that
it
is
was actually
something.
my first time back to the theater since the pandemic started. So
that is something, yeah.
And I definitely could have. It's not that I wasn't uncomfortable going sooner. I just didn't have like a huge motivation to go to the movie theater.
Right. I mean, first time I went back to the movie theaters was when I went to see Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. Mm-hmm. And now, second time back in the movie theater watching the Venom sequel. Yeah. So
yeah, I am disappointed I did not get to see Tenet, the Christopher Nolan movie.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of Christopher Nolan movies, but they released that kind of right in the middle of the pandemic, so it's just like not great to really go out at that time.
Right, it was not that good of a time at that, but it did win an Academy Award for Best Visuals, so that's something for Christopher Nolan.
Yep.
So anyway, jumping back to the Venom sequel, we have Tom Hardy as Eddie Brock, a.k.a. Venom, Woody Harrelson as Cletus Cassidy, a.k.a. Carnage, Naomi Harris as Frances, plus she is known as Shriek in the film, Michelle Williams as Anne, Scott Reed as Dan Lewis, Peggy Liu as Mrs. Chen, the convenience store owner, and Stephen Graham as Patrick Mulligan. So that's the cast right there.
Yeah, I thought Woody Harrelson, I mean, the dude's a really talented actor. I thought he did a pretty good job in the role in this film, and just in general, I think he's good at tackling quite a variety of roles.
Right,
so,
and plus he appeared in the first Venom film for only a post-credits scene to set up the sequel, by the way.
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay.
And he was only in that film for a brief moment, well, until the sequel. Yeah. But I mean, I liked Woody Harrelson in this film. There was a lot more of I should say a lot more of Cletus Cassidy in that film, and maybe a lot more Carnage. Well, actually, maybe somewhere down the middle, there was like a fine line between Cletus Cassidy and Carnage. Mm-hmm. Or maybe I'm just saying this because Cletus Cassidy is Carnage throughout the entire film.
No, I definitely think kind of the pacing was off in that. I think they tried really hard to make us feel bad about Cletus Cassidy's story and make us feel bad for the antagonist, and I think it was a little bit too heavy-handed.
Yeah,
in trying to force that narrative, because
especially for a 97-minute film, because for the most part of that film, it's a ride. It's like you're on a ride, and I will say this: it was a fun ride, but I feel like they could have added a little more, maybe a little more. How should I say this? Maybe a little more between Venom and Carnage, rather than just that one scene, that final battle scene. Now that could just be my point of view, because because Venom and Carnage, they're probably two of the biggest Marvel villains in comics. Particularly their rivalry, as I should say, when they go up against each other. But when it comes to Spider-Man, they're basically two of the biggest enemies.
Yeah, I think part of the issue for me is that they tried to create this kind of tension, this conflict between Eddie Brock and Venom, and like their possible incompatibility. And it was really kind of just a little cheesy to me and a little bit played out. It would have been much more interesting to see some kind of either some kind of physicality or some kind of science reason why, they're not as compatible for a reason, or some kind of scenario that goes horribly wrong that, questions their whole anti-hero dynamic. Like, that would have been way more interesting than the whole thing of, dude, you're just kind of annoying. I don't want to be in your body anymore. Because that's what it was in the movie, and I'm just like,
that's the thing. I mean, because they're more buddies, or should I say, buddies. They're buddies. They're basically buddies in that film. And here's the thing: I like the chemistry between Eddie Brock and Venom. That's what I like about this film. We get to see the chemistry between the two. But what's actually surprising of how Venom wants to be free, basically eating people's heads off. But then eats chickens, chickens and chocolate. Oh man, remember the chickens in that film? Yeah, I remember. And then I like how Venom makes breakfast for Eddie. It's just I thought that was hilarious.
Yeah, that stuff is pretty funny. I just think the problem is just that the tone in the movie was set wrong. Because they really tried to play out the whole thing of us trying to feel bad for Cletus Cassidy's backstory and justify his actions. And I'm just like, if you're going to play that serious tone and then have all this jokey stuff on the side, I would rather they just go, like, all one way or the other.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I would much rather prefer they just be sassy all the way like Deadpool or like Guardians of the Galaxy or something.
Yeah, because if you think about it, in the opening of the film, and by the way, forgot to put out this warning: major spoilers ahead, folks. We're in spoiler territory here for this film review, by the way. And so, basically, because the film opens up as Saint Estes' home for unwanted children, and this is where we see Cletus Cassidy and his girlfriend Frances Barrison, who is known as Shriek in this. Who's known as Shriek. Basically, Cletus and Frances are actually a couple, love couple in this film, including the comics as well. But Frances was taken away to Ravencroft Institute, which, if I remember correctly, is basically isn't that one of those like mental institutions?
Yeah. I mean, obviously, this is some kind of fictionalized institution.
Because I think Ravencroft was also was something that was played in the comics as well. And also Cletus Cassidy ends up in San Quentin prison. And by the way, the police officer that appeared in the beginning of the film is named Patrick Mulligan, and he was the one who shot Shriek in the eye. Or no, Francis, aka Shriek, in the eye, because they were taking her to the Ravencroft Institute, but because Frances was about to make a killing move on Patrick Mulligan, but Mulligan pulled the trigger on Francis's eye while Francis blew out his eardrum.
Some additional context here, because we've talked about, the whole you should feel bad for these characters' backstory. What happened there, from what I remember correctly, is that Cletus Cassidy had killed several of his family members.
Yeah.
Supposedly he claimed that they were abusive to him. So he killed like his grandmother and someone else, like his mother, I think.
I believe
and that's
so.
That's how he ended up in this home for unwanted children.
Yeah, in this home, and this is where he meets meets Frances Barrison.
Yeah, and I believe he was getting bullied a lot and beaten up a lot, and then that's what happened. Is because I think Frances used her shrieking powers,
right?
Which is enough to like kill like the children that were harassing him, and then that's how they both ended up in prison / being executed.
Right. I mean, Cletus Cassidy was close to being executed, and this also freaked out Shriek as well. No pun intended. And also, I also liked how in the first act of the film, we get to see Eddie Brock and Cletus Cassidy. They're basically talking to each other, or should I say interviewing each other, basically about Cletus's life. What was his life like? And I think you summed it up pretty well on your end, Jonathan. And one part that I didn't really get, and I think you might disagree with me on this one. It was when Cletus Cassidy bites Eddie's hand.
Yeah. So that's honestly one of the most frustrating parts of the movie for me. Obviously, that was him just kind of being weird and aggressive. So we can understand that. What the movie seems to imply, though, is that is how Cletus Cassidy gains his Carnage form. Is that by biting Eddie Brock, from his blood or whatever, he gets that Venom DNA or whatever it's supposed to be. But that's how he gets the Carnage form. And for me, that's easily probably the most disappointing part of the movie because they just kind of yada over how that's even possible.
Right.
Is it really that simple that you just bite somebody that that has a symbiote in them, and you also gain your own symbiote? Is there? I think you had mentioned that the implication is that because of Cletus Cassidy's extreme personality, his violent personality, that's why he's able to manifest that form. But they easily could have explained that in 2 to 3 lines of dialogue, and they didn't. So it just kind of makes me cranky that they didn't explain that.
I think it's also the fact that Venom took over that part. And because this was close to his coming into his execution for Cletus Cassidy.
Yeah.
Because Venom did interfere with that conversation. I think this was the second conversation that they had. Because the first conversation was more, how do I say this? Subtle, but calm. Am I saying that right? Subtle,
yes.
Subtle. Yeah, because for what I found out, because Cletus Cassidy in the comics. Cletus Cassidy, when Eddie Brock's Venom symbiote soon returned to be bonded again, and now this is going to Cletus Cassidy in the comics, allowing Venom to escape prison. The symbiote left its offspring in the cell due to the alien mindset. Plus, the symbiote felt no emotion attachment to his offspring, regarding it as an insignificant, and thus never communicated its existence to Brock.
Wait. So by offspring, you mean there was a little piece, a little blob?
Yeah, like a little
slime blob.
Yeah, like a little piece of it. Plus,
so it wasn't just the blood or
No, it wasn't just like that. But the new symbiote then bonded with Brock's cellmate Cletus Cassidy through a cut on his hand, transforming Cletus Cassidy into Carnage. Now in this film, as we mentioned, it's the bite. Cletus Cassidy bites Brock's hand.
Yeah.
And this was in the San Quentin prison.
Yeah.
So I guess this is probably a callback to the comics, even though it has that connection to the comics, even though Eddie Brock was only interviewing Cletus Cassidy in this film.
Mm-hmm.
So I can see the connection where they're going with, but also at the same time, still a little disappointing of how that works.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's basically the point. Also, I also caught this when seeing the film, but to the convenience store scene in the beginning of the film where Eddie and Venom were originally going to buy chocolate from the convenience store that is owned by Mrs. Shen. There was a magazine featuring a photo of Stan Lee on the bottom left-hand side of the screen. If you watch the film, on the bottom left-hand of the screen, there is a magazine that has Stan Lee's image on it. And I actually caught that. I was like,
that's cute.
I was like, that's a Stan Lee image.
Didn't they, before he died, fully digitize him? I thought they actually recorded enough, video footage that they can pretty much just digitally edit him in.
I don't really know. I actually don't know.
I mean, don't quote me on that fact, but I thought I read about it somewhere where they did that, which is, real cool. I mean, Stan Lee is obviously, such an influential figure in pop culture, not just in comics, but, we've seen how wide-ranging of an effect that Marvel and just comic book culture has really affected the pop culture of the U.S. and the world.
Right.
And so, I think it's a real sweet thing that they keep paying an homage to him because
that was good. I like that. I like that, and that was probably the first time I actually saw an image of Stan Lee in a film that I haven't seen forever. Actually, I take that back. There was an image of Stan Lee in the Deadpool sequel, but more as a graffiti. But I'm talking about or maybe I'm just thinking, maybe just how the movie, I just haven't been through the movie experience since the pandemic, movie theater wise. But anyway, that was actually that was actually pretty good. I like, but oh man, Anne is the ex fiance to Eddie Brock, and Anne was getting engaged to Dan Lewis, who's the doctor, the doctor in this film. Actually, Dan Lewis was the doctor in the first film, but also Anne's new boyfriend, which we haven't seen much of Anne, but I'm probably I probably want to get to Anne a little later because I want to bring up the prison breakout scene. Hands down, in my opinion, I think that was the best scene in that film.
Yeah, I think that was the best action scene in that movie. I just think the scale of it, and also kind of the I don't want to necessarily say it was that spooky.
No,
but they built the tension of it up nicely.
They did because Cletus Cassidy was about to be executed, but this was after when he bit Eddie Brock's hand, which got a little bit of that symbiote inside him, so, which explains why now, because he has the symbiote inside him, he transformed into Carnage, and that part where we see Carnage's face for the first time, that actually got me. That got me freaked out. And I was like, oh my goodness. I was like, and I liked how in this sequence it showcased Carnage's fighting abilities. Like we see multiple arms basically from the back. Yeah. And the way how he takes out the guards, like the bullets go through him, as he telepathically opens up his chest. Yeah. I was like, that showcased Carnage's character, and boy, I wanted to see more of that. I feel like there's probably a couple of other shots they took out in that sequence. Don't you think?
Yeah, possibly. Again, not to keep ragging on this film, because I still had a good time.
Yeah, that was
And I should contextualize my criticisms too of the movie. There's nothing wrong if you enjoy these types of movies. Naturally, I tend to be a little bit more critical about Marvel films just because I know they have a huge budget. So I feel like we have more of a right to be a little bit more critical of it, or at least I do. There's nothing wrong if you personally enjoy the movie, because that's the whole point. If you enjoy it, that's
that's okay. If you enjoy the film, that's fine. That's totally fine, and I understand. But as reviewers, it's often good to show your own opinion of the film, whether you like it or not.
Yeah. And so here's my issue too, is that here Mark has very nicely listed on the script the different action sequences. 3 out of the 4 action sequences are focused entirely on Carnage. It's only until we get towards the end with the battle at the church or the cathedral, whatever it is, that we actually see Venom in action. And I'm just like, the movie's titled Venom, Let There Be Carnage, so maybe it's supposed to be more of like a 50-50 kind of thing. But even in that case, then the 3 out of the 4 action scenes are focused on the antagonist, not the protagonist. So
and here's the thing. Here's another issue that I had. I feel like we could have seen more of Carnage and Venom. I feel like there could have been just one more scene before the church fight. Just have Venom go up against Carnage for the first time, but at the same time,
there should have been a fight between Venom and Carnage where Venom gets gets beaten up and loses the fight.
Yeah,
that would have been that, and that would have played it to the drama of the film way better.
Right.
Because in that final fight scene, they were talking about Venom was just like, "Lol, I don't want to do this fight. That thing looks really intimidating."
Yeah,
right? And I'm just like, that would have been sold way better if they had a fight earlier on that didn't go well, and then they totally lose that fight.
This probably would have been an opportunity to have that scene after that one party scene because after Venom breaks up with Eddie Brock, Venom bonds with other people and parties and gets drunk.
Yeah,
I found that pretty hilarious, but almost unnecessary at the same time because that actually would have been a cool opportunity to have Venom fight Carnage for the first time. But that actually would have been the scene after that party scene, like Venom being drunk and then tries to beat up Carnage, but comes to realize after the fight that's like, I just got beaten up by Carnage.
Yep.
And then I'm pretty sure this is where we get the scene where Venom goes to Mrs. Chen at that convenience store.
Yeah.
From the remember that one scene when it was just that one guy being drunk.
Oh yeah, he was like shopping around for a new host.
Yeah, but what Mrs. Chen didn't realize that it was Venom inside that person's body because Eddie and Venom split up. And this is surprising to me, and I did not see this coming, but I didn't think Venom would bond with Mrs. Chen during that one scene when Anne and Dan went to see Mrs. Chen.
That was pretty hilarious.
Yeah, and I like how Anne tries to talk Venom into teaming up with Eddie because Anne and Eddie, they were actually a romantic couple in the first film. Before they split, because Eddie lost his journalism career for I think in the first film, because in the first film basically he tried to interfere an interview conversation with one of the interviewers. It was his name was Drake, and that was Drake. And in that first film, Drake was Riot, another symbiote in the first film. So basically, it's basically surprising how I find it hilarious that Anne, going back to the conversation with Venom, basically in a very interesting way, just so he can, because Eddie and Anne were a couple, but it's just the fact that Venom I think it's just the fact that Venom likes how Eddie and Anne were a couple at the time. I think it's just I found it hilarious. And
speaking of couples, this is another moment where I'm just like, lost opportunity. So we have a brief moment in the movie where Venom integrates into Anne.
Yes,
and we get to see like a she-Venom kind of form.
Yes,
for
and
a short while.
That was also in the first film as well, just for a brief moment. Because when John and I saw this in theaters, he brought up that Anne should have been the she-Venom fighting Carnage alongside Venom.
Yeah, there should have been that ending fight scene would have been way cooler if it was a 2v2.
Right.
Between all four of those
that actually would have been awesome. I mean, I didn't think of that. It's just like I find the fight scene to be cool, but I just didn't think of that.
Yeah. And again, this is part of what I was talking about. If it's so easy to gain symbiote powers, why didn't Anne just bite Eddie and gain the she-Venom form?
Yeah.
Or something. I feel like this should have been possible, and it's just a missed opportunity.
At least Dan was able to fight fire with fire. And what I meant by fire, I meant by a blowtorch and gasoline.
Yeah.
On Carnage. Yeah, and basically that's what I meant by that. It's just at least Dan was able to help out at the end, and I find that little smack that Eddie accidentally made to be hilarious because Venom bonded back with Eddie Brock.
Yeah.
After when Eddie and Venom saw the ring on Anne's finger that Anne's engaged, and Venom was like, "No!"
Yeah.
But now for the most part, it's just basically Cletus Cassidy and Carnage going on a Carnage rampage with Francis, otherwise known as Shriek. Which, to be fair, I liked how they're building that relationship between Cletus and Francis. But also at the same time, it's kind of like Joker and Harley Quinn. But this is basically Marvel's version, because DC's version is basically Joker and Harley Quinn. Marvel, Cletus Cassidy and Francis.
Even in that case, though, I feel like what we saw was worse than Harley Quinn and Joker, because Harley Quinn and Joker both know that they're freaking nuts, and part of, especially the way DC has been depicting it in recent films, like in the new Suicide Squad films, is that they relish in the fact that they're absolutely crazy, and they play into that. Everything about the editing, the music choice, they try to make it over the top. I don't appreciate the fact that they went halfsies here and tried to play it part serious. You should feel bad.
Yeah,
and then also, haha, we're both crazy.
But I think Carnage got the best out of the two of them. Because Carnage wants to shut Shriek up during that final battle, because the sound waves are the weaknesses. Sound waves and fire are the weaknesses to a symbiote.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's basically the point of it. Now, during the final battle, Patrick Mulligan, the police officer who was also in this film, he was also the target for Francis, because Patrick Mulligan was the one who shot Francis's eye out. Mm-hmm. Well, actually, she still got the eye. It's just basically the how do I say this? Like,
I thought it was like a fake eye.
Yeah,
it was like a replacement, like glass,
one
of those fake ones.
Well, but here's the thing: like, Patrick Mulligan got his eardrum blew out.
Yeah.
Like, how do I say this? Like, an injury. Like, Francis got her eye shot out. Patrick Mulligan got his eardrum shot out.
Yeah.
Because now they're both like, now they're both traumatized.
But antagonists got to antagonize.
Yeah. But it's in the end where Francis goes to town on Patrick Mulligan. Like, I thought she killed off Patrick Mulligan. But somehow, just a little bit of that symbiote landed on Patrick Mulligan, and from a little bit of research, I just discovered that one of the Patrick Mulligan is another symbiote character named Toxin.
I didn't even see the part where he integrated with a little bit of the symbiote.
Yeah, I didn't catch.
Was there like a cut or something, or is it like some kind of?
Maybe, I don't know. I didn't see. I didn't look close. I didn't look closely but from what I found out, Mulligan was still alive because his eyes began to flash blue.
Yeah, we saw that part.
He's alive. So he's alive. So that means either it was probably a blink and you'll miss a moment that a part of Carnage, the little bit of the little bit of the symbiote landed on Patrick Mulligan. So it looks like we might see Patrick Mulligan in future Venom films.
Part of the context here, too, by the way, is that I think if you're infused with the symbiote, that you gain superhuman durability, right?
Right.
Like, you can survive injuries you're way more resilient to injuries.
Mm-hmm.
So that would explain why he's, like, not dead.
Right. And also, yeah, I mean, Venom, or should I say Eddie Brock, Venom kills off Cletus Cassidy.
Yeah. I mean, that was always going to happen.
Yeah.
That was expected.
Yeah, so, I mean, I would have loved to see more Carnage, but...
I gotta say, though, let's talk about this final battle scene.
Yeah, let's talk about it.
In the narrative, I had joked about this with Mark in the theater, because we got to a point where they're climbing up some kind of clock tower.
Yes.
So first of all, it looks pretty shoddy, in my opinion, and this... Knowing the history of the director now, this makes a little bit more sense. Seeing them climb out the top of the clock tower, it very much looked like some cheap version of King Kong, because they're both these big, muscular kind of alien things climbing up the structure. And
but to add on,
weird.
But to add on, there was this one scene where it almost calls back to Amazing Spider-Man 2, where Gwen Stacy's death in the Amazing Spider-Man 2.
We're dropping all the plot spoilers today.
Yeah.
Plot spoilers.
It was like almost a callback to it. I was like, no, they better not kill off Anne. I was like, oh my goodness. I mean, I'm glad they didn't, because it would have been Amazing Spider-Man 2 all over again.
But I was like seriously confused for a sec, because it wasn't just like plot-wise something similar seemed like it was about to happen. It was also the cinematography. I mean, the shot composition, the lighting. I was just like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
I've seen this before. This doesn't seem right.
Yeah, and I mean, I didn't think of that because... Yeah. I didn't think of that because, I've seen Amazing Spider-Man 2. It's just the fact, like, I just can't get over that scene. But like, years later, I just didn't think of that.
Yeah, yeah.
And, anything to finish off about that final battle?
I just thought it was... Understanding, it's funny that you mentioned, because you had mentioned earlier that the way that they constructed the animations for Venom is that they tried to give him this kind of footballer, like this linebacker.
Linebacker.
No, linebacker. Was it a quarterback?
I said quarterback.
Whatever.
Yeah.
I'm not very literate in sports, as you probably guessed.
Nah, same here. But I do talk about sports movies too.
Yeah, they tried to give him this very traditional athletic kind of look, and that makes sense now, because there's a lot of the majority of actions that we see Venom do is a lot of like really like head first kind of charging.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, again, I don't know a lot about the comic book, so maybe I'm missing some kind of context here.
That's probably something.
But from what I see from the design of Venom, I would imagine that he would use a lot more bite-related attacks. So that's his whole thing.
Right.
That he bites the head off of people as the finisher move, right? Like the Mortal Kombat kind of move.
Yeah,
right,
like finish him.
Yeah. But I would imagine that utility-wise, you would want to use that for a lot of other things, especially against an opponent like Carnage, where you have a lot of these tendril-like things.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you want to try to bite them to like try to sever them off? Like, I'm surprised that didn't come up more as a thing in the fight scene.
Yeah, that's the thing. But in the end, really, I mean, for what they did with Carnage throughout the entire film, I say that's probably good of what we got out of Carnage and Cletus Cassidy, because I wanted to see more of this Carnage and Venom, at least one more scene, but maybe for what we got out of Carnage, I say it's pretty good.
I can't say as I'm as enthralled about the the way they wrote
it. It's okay, yeah. And also, just to add this on, should we talk about that post-credit scene?
The post-credit scene where they tease the Spider-Man crossover.
Yes, the Spider-Man No Way Home film, because in the end, there was a news story. Now, this is basically using archive footage from Spider-Man Far From Home, where J. Jonah Jameson, played by J.K. Simmons, giving out a news story that Spider-Man is Peter Parker. And then Venom just looks at the screen and says, "That guy looks delicious."
I think they were implying, too, that there was some kind of multiverse traveling.
Yes.
Too, right? That Venom had, that Eddie Brock Venom had stepped into some kind of thing. What happened towards it? I don't remember how they did that multiverse jump.
I think it's all the pixels, and it's all the pixels I saw.
Yeah, but I don't know I forgot what caused the multiverse jump.
I think because if I remember correctly, in the Spider-Man No Way Home trailer, Peter Parker was tampering with Doctor Strange's spell.
Well, I know from that side of the story. I mean Venom.
Venom.
I don't know how they ended up over there.
Oh, because now if I remember correctly, since Venom, or should I say Eddie Brock, killed off Cletus Cassidy, even though he did killed off Cletus Cassidy, but as of now, I think he's seen as a fugitive now, Eddie Brock, because he just killed off Cletus Cassidy. Although I don't know if you can.
I mean, it's not that important, but I don't know how that multiverse jump happen from this side of the story.
Yeah, that's but
it's not a huge deal.
Yeah, I know, but I just want to bring up that post-credit scene because as of now, I'm looking forward to Spider-Man No Way Home.
I mean, that would be really interesting, Tom Holland. And,
Yep. So, anyway, overall thoughts. I will say, from my point of view, it's not a perfect film, but I will say it's a decent follow-up to the first film, and a lot of critics are saying it's an improvement over the first film.
Real? This was an improvement?
Well, Rotten Tomatoes had a 59% score on Rotten Tomatoes, which is
on the first one?
No, second one.
On this one.
This one.
59's not that great.
It's not that.
Wait, is that reviewer score or is that
Rotten Tomatoes score for critics?
Okay, for critics. Okay.
It's I will say it's good, but not as critically acclaimed. But the first film had a 30% Rotten Tomatoes score from critics.
That's pretty abysmal.
So yeah.
Okay.
But I will say this: it did improve upon the first film. It's not a perfect film because of the pacing. Because the pacing was fast. Now, I mean, it's a fun ride, but I feel like they could have paced it out a bit more. Maybe add a little more just to make the film good. Not almost at 2 hours, but maybe at a close of 2 hours. Just a little bit more. But if I were to grade this film, I would say C+.
I'm not nearly as generous. I'd have to give it a D, maybe a D+ if I'm being very generous. So just to explain part of that grade, despite what I said earlier about I like to be critical of Marvel movies quite a bit, I also understand from the context that a lot of people that watch Marvel movies, and it's not everybody, but I know a lot, just want feel-good, casual experience, just want to lay back and take in kind of the action and kind of the grandiose nature of Marvel films. So I understand that the writing doesn't need to be Academy Award winning.
Yeah,
obviously it doesn't need to be anything that's too
the writing
crazy.
wasn't perfect.
And I think part of my problem is that there's so much of the focus on the antagonist and not the protagonist that the film title might be a little bit misleading.
Yeah,
Venom, Let There Be Carnage, but it really should have been, I don't know, Venom, There Is Carnage or something, because there's so much more of a focus on Carnage and that whole dynamic.
Yeah, and it almost sounds like an R-rated film, and I think this is just coming from the title alone, Carnage. Just from the title alone, don't you think?
Yeah.
Maybe just a little bit?
Yeah, I am surprised that the film did not have more of a graphic tone. Not that it necessarily needs to. Not all of them do. But obviously it's not outside of Marvel's playbook because they're okay with having R-rated films with Deadpool. Yeah. Among other things.
They did the Logan film, Wolverine. Logan was the third Wolverine film. That one got an R-rated rating.
Yeah. I think part of why it bugs me is the fact that very likely they, toned down the movie, made it PG-13 just to make it more marketable.
I think that's the problem. I think that's also the problem because
even when we were watching it, we saw there were some families, with kids.
Yeah,
in the theater, which again, up to you to decide whether or not you want to bring your kids to this kind of movie.
Yeah, and we saw one family. I think I saw one family member sitting right in front of us.
Yeah.
It's just I can see where Sony was going for in this film. Now, to the credit of Andy Serkis, John, if you want to disagree with me, that's okay. I thought the direction that they went with this film, I thought that was pretty good. I give props to Andy Serkis for directing this film because from an actor who is very well known for motion capture performances and CGI, he really did pretty good, even if the writing is not perfect.
Yeah, I think the animation for the most part was good. I think the visual effects were good, but I think part of my complaint too is that that's kind of a standard that Marvel has set by now, and that's part of the fact that Marvel actually has the resources to do that. So if you're a small studio, even if you are a major animation studio, so even if you're like Pixar or DreamWorks, they have to dedicate a lot of workforce and creative power to do that. Marvel, regularly outsources to at least 10, 12 different visual effects studios that have the the money, the resources, and the industry connections to really do that. So, like, every time the visual effects are good, it's kind of just like, for me, it's kind of like the passing grade, because that's just what we expect from Marvel.
They have like different studios, and I think Industrial Light and Magic is one of the main visual effects studios for many of the Marvel films, I think.
Probably. I mean, they're the largest, definitely the largest, one of the most historic kind of visual effects studios.
Including Weta Design that
Weta
Peter Jackson does, and Andy Serkis contribute to Weta Design for some of the Peter Jackson films that he was involved in.
Yeah.
And also Venom, the second Venom film, was on a budget of $110 million.
That's relatively low in the scale of Marvel films, which sounds a little obnoxious to say, right? Because it's $110 million.
But at the same time, it still looks good. It's good looking too, but maybe just from the visual effects perspective.
That is still remarkable. Is that the total budget for like everything, like advertising and everything? Because I can't imagine.
Actually, I think that's just for the budget of the film, but it could be. I think from
because there's no way animation. Yeah, there's no way. Sorry, not animation. Advertisement.
Yeah, because I think the advertisement. I think the advertisement is a little more, but
advertisement's really expensive.
Yeah. So this probably. I mean, $110 million. That's basically the budget as of now. But it's probably going to be more due to the advertisement and.
That's still pretty tight. I mean, you have to imagine how much does Tom Hardy get paid? How much does
Woody
Harrelson get paid? They probably get paid quite a lot.
They probably did. Kind of movie, I mean, it's a Marvel film. Marvel's gonna probably gonna send out a lot of cash to these actors. I mean, and to the credit of the actors, Tom Hardy and Woody Harrelson, I liked them in this film. They were both pretty good.
Yeah, they're very dependable actors, I think.
Yeah.
And I think they delivered the best they could with the roles that were presented.
Yeah, and I think John and I can agree that we both have different opinions on this film, because even though we're not pretty well when it comes to reading comic books, but it's just also different opinions of how we could view this film from a adaptation perspective.
Yeah.
And maybe a little brief history of who these characters are.
Yeah. Well, and it's still important, to that effect, because that's been a point of controversy for other kinds of films that have been adaptations, whether it's adaptations from old TV shows or anime or whatever. This has been a problem where people are just like, oh, well, we don't want to stick too close to the source material, or we want to do our own thing. And I'm just like, that's true to a certain extent, because you have to have your own creative vision, because this is such a huge project, right? If you don't have your own creative vision, then it's like you're not really accomplishing much by just doing a very direct adaptation.
Yeah.
But I still think it's very important for directors and for creators to understand the source material they're dealing with and understand that they have a fan base that's,
right, they got
expecting
a fan base.
Expecting a certain quality.
I feel like this one, I think they just put in Carnage just for the fans.
Yeah, but I don't know, how accurate the depiction is compared to the comic book characters.
Right. So there's definitely a lot more in the characters, even though. But other than that, I mean, I think all in all, I say if you like this film, that is great. If not, hey, totally fine. That is totally fine. It's basically a mixed bag.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that's the luxury we have right now more than ever, is that we have such a wide variety of movies, of media.
Right.
And so, while this isn't a hit for me, I'm sure this is a hit for plenty of other people, and that's great.
I mean, it's already breaking pandemic box office records, so this could be something, even though it probably won't make $1 billion, but it will probably at least a certain amount that'll make it
I can't
at least
imagine
a hit.
It will make $1 billion.
No. Unless Spider-Man No Way Home does it, because that's another film that's really hyped up.
How did the other Spider-Man films do? Did they break the $1 million mark? Or billion,
Spider-Man Far From Home broke $1 billion back in 2019.
Yeah, that I would expect that.
Yeah, so I mean, even though, yes, this is still the midst of the pandemic, so we'll just have to find out. Only time will tell.
Mm-hmm.
So, yep. Anyway, we'll end here today. We'll end here for this episode. So, anyway, thank you for tuning in to Codo Cinema. I'm your host, Mark Codo, a.k.a. Codoman.
And your humble guest star, Jonathan Fong.
Remember to watch movies and stay positive.